Jillian Turecki, welcome back to the show. How you doing? So good to see you.
It's so good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited for your book. It Begins With You. I feel like this is a hotly anticipated book. A lot of people spend a lot of time praying that you'd finally release your tome, and so I'm so excited for you.
Here we are. I know, it's very exciting. Very exciting and nerve-wracking, but it's all good.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It Begins With You. Where does the title come from?
I realized through just my own personal development and working through my stuff and in helping people for like 20 years that everything begins with how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we show up. And so I really believe that we have to be the change that we want to see in our love life, regardless if we're in a relationship, we're single, we're heartbroken. We are always looking for the other person to change or for things to change in the love life in our lives, period, for us to feel better. But it really does begin with us. And so it's not just about accountability, although that's a part of it. It's just that we all actually are pretty powerful. We have the power to influence a relationship and to influence our lives. And a lot of people are walking around feeling powerless without the tools because we don't learn this in school. Many of us don't have this modeled to us when we were kids. I mean, not everyone had parents that didn't get along, but many people have. And I think that we could be happy. We could be making the money that we want to make. We could have our physical health. We could be just a rock star in every area of our life. But if our romantic life, if our relationship life is not going well, we're going to wake up feeling empty and stressed. And I really do believe that people can have the love that they so desire and deserve, but it's not going to happen just from like some perfect person just appearing in your life. I mean, maybe a great person will just appear in your life, but if you don't know how to actually interact with that person or relate to that person or communicate, and you don't actually work on the things that you need to work on, it's never really going to go anywhere. So this was really just helping people to understand that we are the common denominator in all our relationships, which does not mean that we are all to blame for what happens in our relationships, but it does mean that we have more power and control than we actually believe that we do.
And when you say that a person needs to work on themselves before they can show up and make a relationship work, I mean, what does that work actually look like? Yeah,
that's a good question. So first, what I will say is I do not believe that it's make sure you're healed and you feel totally whole and then you can be in a relationship. I think that that's actually complete BS. Every single person you meet and you interact with, they're a mirror. So we learn about ourselves through our relationship with others and all types of relationships, because everyone is sort of reflecting back to us. So two things can be true at the same time. One is we are never going to be completely, I think this idea of feeling whole is sort of lifelong. This idea of loving ourselves is lifelong and trying to learn how to do that. And it's also true that we do need some baseline sense of self, which I would equate to self-esteem or self-acceptance and self-understanding in order to participate in a relationship and have any sort of chance of being good for us, functional and healthy. So you don't have to be perfect, but the work on ourselves, to answer your question, is different for everyone. You know, some people who have very troubling past relationships. Let's say they have really hard past relationships. And it's beaten them down, right? Like they feel kind of beaten down by it and by life. So what would it mean to work on themselves? Well, it could mean a number of things, but it starts with acknowledging and trying to identify what is it in you that co-created this part of your life, right? Like that you actually got involved with this person. What are the things that you did in this relationship? Why did you choose this person? What are some of your patterns in the relationship that, if you were really honest with yourself, doesn't serve the relationship? And where did those patterns come from? Like, where did you learn them? Did you learn them from childhood? Did you learn them because of the social circle that you hang around? What are your beliefs around it? So I do believe that that's a big part of working on oneself. I think another really big part of working on oneself is just learning how to be who it is that you really want to be in life, not and letting go of sort of the attachment to who you think you should be and who you've been conditioned to be. You know, these are all deeply existential things, but are you basically, if we were to say that we are actually the conductors of our life, right? That we can't, there's a lot of things that are going to happen in our life that are outside of our control, but basically we are going to go about our life, and there's going to be many, many forks in the road, and we can go left or we can go right. And our life and the quality of our life is largely dependent on the choices that we make. And we're going to make some bad choices, and hopefully we're going to learn, and we're going to make some good choices. So what choice do you want to make? Like, what are the choices you want to make? What kind of life do you want to live? And sometimes that's what working on yourself is. Sometimes it's learning how to have more fun because you've been so conditioned to or you just overvalue certainty and everything has to be exactly the way it's supposed to be. You know, whatever that is, it's about feeling some sense of internal freedom. Honestly, I think that's what everyone strives for, whether they know it or not, is this sense of freedom, until we realize that part of what's making us feel just imprisoned, especially when we're lucky enough to live in a free society, is the confines of our mind.
It can be hard, though, to truly see ourselves.
Very.
Do you agree? I mean, it's like, I don't know if you remember, there was a trend a couple months ago. People were asking ChatGPT, an AI algorithm, to roast their Instagram feeds. And the responses that it was turning up was really funny.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people, I think sometimes it's hard to see ourselves from a meta point of view.
Yeah, we don't
and
see
our
ourselves.
patterns. Yeah.
It's very hard. And that's why you need to kind of talk to someone about it, and you have to be self-reflective and bounce it off, and, you know, maybe have conversations with some of your best friends about, you know, what do you see that I don't see? That's good. And also, you know, gently let me know, like, what do I actually need to work on? But that's all the process of self-reflection. You know, this is the things that's important. Like, after a breakup, a lot of people will just not take any time to self-reflect. And then they get back into the dating pool, and they're kind of poisoning the pool, honestly, and there's no set amount of time. You know, it's not like, oh, you need to really process for 6 months and then you're ready. Like, all these rules are such BS. It's so individual. Some people, it's like they were really ready to move on from a relationship, and maybe it wasn't toxic. It just expired because it was time to expire, whatever the case may be. But it's so important to just look within, to take responsibility. It's self-awareness. And I think that probably one of the most underrated and important relationship skills is self-awareness. Yes, you then have to take action, but some awareness of yourself. You know, the people who have no self-awareness, who have no idea how they're difficult, who have no idea how, you know, they might be challenging to live with or love, you know, because we all have our things. Those are the people who are generally a nightmare to be in a relationship with. So you want to we all have blind spots in our self-awareness, and a lot of people think they're more self-aware than they actually are. So we want a little bit of humility there, but yeah, just have some self-awareness. And then this is easier said than done, but the courage to kind of bring that up, even if it's in a dating scenario. It's like, maybe not the first date, but like, hey, like, this is what I struggle with. I'm working on it, but this is sort of the thing that I come with that is challenging for me. And so then I do something really kind for myself in that moment. I give the other and I do something respectful to the other person. I give them an opportunity to back out if they think that it's too much. And then what I give myself is the information, so that if someone is like, that might be too much for me, then I know that they're not for me. Now, sure, people then ignore that and say, well, you know, that's totally fine. Like, you're hot, like, whatever. I'll just ignore that red flag that you told me, or like, whatever, like, I can handle it. But generally, that's what we want to be able to do. If more people were going on dates and just saying, hey, you know, these are the things I'm really proud of about what I've done. And this is also like, this is like, I had this relationship with my mom or this relationship with my father, and I've done a lot of work on it, and I'm really aware of it, and I own it. But this is how this is like what you might confront, or what we might confront together because of my stuff. What about you? If people were actually having those kind of honest conversations with each other, wow, there would be a lot less breakups, I believe.
Yeah. It's important to ask for constructive feedback.
Hard to receive, though.
Hard to receive, yeah, without getting defensive.
Yeah.
That is a big issue. I think for me, seeing a therapist was a really important mirror to understanding some of the ways that I deal with conflict in relationships. And I found that one of the things that I do is I dissociate when things get tough. It's not necessarily, I don't think it has anything to do with an attachment style or anything like that, but when things get hard, I tend to retract into my own world. And it not only makes it difficult to communicate from that place.
Yeah.
It's actually more so that I just don't want to communicate from that place. I just like retract into my own little safe, comfort bubble universe. And I know that that's hard. That can be hard for the person that I'm in a relationship with.
But that just saying that is huge, right? Most people are walking around not even able to say like, this is what I do when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And wow, like I can acknowledge that that's not the easiest thing for someone to deal with. And then the next step would be, okay, what can I do differently? Maybe I can just communicate and say, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It could be, I'm just feeling all these emotions right now. And you can say, and you can point to your body where you're feeling it. So you can be vulnerable. I think I just need like a few hours or half a day to just kind of retreat. I know it's my thing. By the way, I love you. Like I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to leave you guessing. This is just sort of like my process just to kind of like gather myself. And then the hope is that then your intention would be to kind of take that time to recalibrate, to try to get your nervous system back into like some sort of equilibrium. And then you communicate from a better place. And alternatively is to communicate anyway and be like, I don't like to communicate from this place because I'm overwhelmed. But maybe that's a moment where you need a little help or support from your partner. Or maybe you need some clarification, or maybe you need a hug.
I love that.
Yeah.
Are there any yellow flags that one might present with early on in a relationship that might suggest that the requisite work hasn't been done?
Yeah, and this is a reddish kind of flag, but when someone is just bad mouthing their ex, or their ex-spouse, their ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, ex-partner, whatever. Oh yeah, this and that, and they're going on and on and on and on. And you might say, well, what did you learn from that? And they're like, I learned they're an asshole, like whatever it is. Then that's actually an indication that they're not accountable, that they haven't done any self-reflecting. And that actually is a very big red flag. A yellow flag, I think, would just be someone who is still maybe not totally bad-mouthing their ex, but is still stuck in the story that they had with their ex. Instead of being able to sort of see it differently and heal. And that would just be something like, easily triggered or frustrated by something that they did. Like they're still somehow getting under your skin. They're doing that because there's still a story, a narrative around your relationship with them or the end of the relationship with them where you're giving it a meaning, and it just means that
it's like an exposed nerve.
It's an exposed nerve. Exactly. And what it indicates is there's some sort of unfinished business there. There's still a meaning that you're giving it all. There's still a story that you're stuck on. And that's a yellow flag insofar as, like, for me, that would make me curious to learn more. And I would suggest to someone, say to them something like, it seems like you're still, like, there's still something there in just your mind. I know that you're not with this person. I know that maybe you're really over them, but are you? Like, I'm a little concerned about that. Can we talk about it?
That makes a ton of sense. How do we stop obsessing over somebody? I know this is a topic that you've given some attention to, on your social media, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
How do we stop obsessing over somebody?
So let's go through different phases. So let's say you're obsessing over someone who you barely know, right? It's like very early on. You don't have a history with them at all. And part of the obsessing is that maybe you've been single for a long time and you haven't met anyone in a long time who you're really excited about. And then you meet someone and you're really excited about them. And then add to that, you're bored in life. You're a little bored. You're a little unfulfilled. Maybe you're a lot unfulfilled. Maybe you don't like your job. Maybe you don't have that much meaning in life. And you've been kind of waiting, even if you're not totally consciously aware of it, you've been kind of waiting for a relationship to pull you out of the monotony of your life. And then you meet someone and you feel the chemistry and you're excited. Like, it's a great feeling, you know, we all know that feeling. And we meet them and they're like, wow, like, you know, they're so smart, they're so beautiful, they're so cool, like we get along, we have similar values, like all these things. And literally it's like we've known them like a day or a week, whatever, or even 2 weeks, they're still a stranger. And you can't stop thinking about them. And then all of a sudden you're like waiting for the phone and this and that. And so we think that it's about that person when really it's not. It's that they are a metaphor for change. They're a metaphor for hope. The hope of a relationship, the hope for love, the hope for the getting out of the life that you are actually terribly bored by, which is your responsibility to make some changes so that you're not so bored by it. And so they're just a metaphor. It's never really about that person. And so that obsessing, the antidote to that obsessing, again, and there could be other things, trauma, stuff like that, but the real antidote is, okay, well, what's actually going on in your life? You know, like, how much stock are you putting in a romantic relationship? Do you have this belief that someone can come into your life and make your life all better? Because actually they can very temporarily in the beginning. But once that honeymoon phase goes and you're very aware of the fact, like so keenly aware of the fact that you are relating with another human being who has their own flaws and that you, like, no one belongs on the like there's no pedestals. And then you're like, oh, damn it. Like, I still have my boring life and this person isn't rescuing me from it. So people obsess because they're bored and because they think it's about this person and it's the feeling of aliveness. It's like, it's aliveness. And if you're feeling bored and you're feeling like not kind of plugged into your life, then they become that metaphor. The obsessing that happens, maybe it's a year after a breakup or even longer. Like it's not, when you're first breaking up, obsessing and rumination is an unfortunate but realistic part of the process. Breaking up makes you crazy, like we go temporary. Not all breakups are created equal, but we tend to go a little temporarily insane, right?
Well, it's like withdrawal from
a drug.
Yeah.
100%. But let's just say you're past all that stage and you're still kind of ruminating, obsessing. There's no one answer. I do believe that context matters. Is there something else going on in your life that is feeling unsettled, or maybe something that's somewhat traumatic? Was something going on when you were with this person, and then it's truly not so much about the person anymore. It's what they represent. It's you got to search for the metaphor. And then you also have to look at where am I right now? Am I afraid to move on? Am I afraid to move forward? Do I feel like, is the meaning that I assigned to this person who I'm still obsessing about, who I'm not with, but it's been a long time and, whatever, is it that I feel like I'm a failure? And so I'm obsessing over this person, but really it's because I don't feel good enough. Is it, letting go is really difficult. Is it that you have generally a hard time letting go in life and surrendering, and that this is just an extension of something, a greater sort of spiritual, if you will, sort of lesson that you need to learn? Like, where there's so many things hidden in the unconscious. Are you very close with your family? And what you're really missing is feeling connected to a larger family unit. And so your connection to this person means a connection to a larger family unit. So you're obsessing over that. There's so many layers to this. There's not just one answer. But I do think that the one answer is you got to explore the context and that consider that maybe it's not really about that person anymore.
Are there ways of making that transition easier? Or is it as simple as you just got to put in the time and go through all the necessary stages of grief?
You mean like with heartbreak? Yeah. So you do have to go through all the necessary stages. And grief, we're talking about grief from a relationship, right? Not someone dying.
Is it the same?
No.
It's not the same.
Do you think it's the same? You lost a parent. I don't think it's the same.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not the same. Because
it's similar.
Well, because my mom meant so much more to me than anybody who I had ever dated has meant to me.
Yeah.
But it's still, removing somebody from your life that has provided, value.
Yes.
They provided value in ways that your parent could never provide you.
Yes. Sure.
So it's different, but I would say that there are some overlapping similarities.
Yeah, for sure. One could say grief is grief. I think, I think that the goal is to get over a relationship. But it takes time. It really can take time. But you never really, grief over the loss of a parent, I have found, changes in as much as that you are more adapted to your reality, but the grief never really goes away. That's my experience, at least.
Yeah. It's a matter of time.
Time changes things, but you just carry the grief differently.
Yeah. Well said. In your book, you talk about how important it is to recognize the difference between lust and love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes intuitive sense. But those are not always so easy to segregate.
No, because I think that for centuries, philosophers and authors and poets have been trying to theorize, and psychologists trying to understand what it means to love, right? And so this is this thing I don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers. We're just all trying to figure it out. Lust tends to be very obsessive. Tends to be very unstable. It tends to be very conditional. It tends to be very rooted in passion. Love, and the love that we feel when we're falling in love with someone versus the love that we feel once we've maybe been with them a long time and built a family with them, they feel like family. It changes. It could still be love, but it changes. It changes, and the meaning that we assign to it changes, and it deepens, right? We could have an emotional bond with someone, and then 3 years into our relationship with them, or 10 years or 20 years, we can think this is a bond. This is an unshakable bond. Whereas in the beginning, yes, it felt like a bond, but nothing like it feels now, right? I think to love someone is to is to want to meet their needs as much as wanting to meet our own needs. Not more, not less. And maybe sometimes more. You know, it means sometimes putting them first. Now, not in the way that's like, oh, you always put the other person first and you abandon yourself, because that's a lot of what I work with. Like, don't abandon yourself, don't forget you. But in a healthier dynamic where it's not you just completely betraying yourself, you know, sometimes it really is. I mean, I really think I know whenever I really love something, I put that person or that thing or that animal like before my needs. It's not all the time, but sometimes I do that. And to me, that's to really love someone, where you might think, all right, I'm tired today. I'm only a little bit tired. And my partner, spouse, whatever, is really tired and really having a hard time. My 20% fatigue or whatever today is irrelevant. What's relevant is that I support this person as they're going through a really hard time. To me, that's love. Love is a verb. It's an action. You know, it's not just a feeling. Lust is all feeling. It's all hormones, all feeling, all excitement. But like I said, it's very conditional. Oh, you just did something I don't like. I'm going to get the ick, like whatever, you know, or, yeah, like I'm like not really in a good mood today. So I'm just not going to like, you know, kind of hang out with you or do that thing that I always do that you really love. Like, I don't care about that because right now I'm just kind of in a bad mood. Like, to me, that's not love. And so learning how to love sometimes means learning how to transcend your ego, how to show up, you know, how to choose someone every day. Because if you're going to be with someone for the long term, there are going to be days even when you love someone, even when you're attracted to them, where you're just like not going to be in the mood or they're going to annoy you. And our lives are dependent on the choices that we make. It's like we can either just do that thing that we always do in our past relationships and get a little selfish and just think about ourselves. Or maybe we can like kind of do something for them that they really need in that moment, even though we're not in the mood. To me, love isn't selfish. Love is all about giving and receiving. And it's not the same thing as you can say, I love you. I'm really depleted right now. I got to go fill my cup because I'm only as good for you as I am with a filled cup. That's very different than getting into the selfish like routine of, yeah, I'm like kind of like not in the mood, or like just over obsessing with our own needs and not really thinking about like what their needs are. I think that, you know, overcoming our selfishness. I mean, I don't consider myself, for example, a selfish person. I consider myself a very nurturing person. I think I'm like a great partner, like these things. And I can also sometimes be selfish because everyone can. Like I can sometimes like obsess about what I'm not getting and my needs and not really think about the other person's needs sometimes. And so if we can admit, like that's a self-awareness, the ways in which we can be sort of selfish and self-serving and not really loving, and then want to do better. And like want to be better.
But it's okay to be selfish sometimes too, though, isn't it?
It depends what you define as selfish. I think it's, if you're in a relationship, no, it's not. But it depends what you define it. Is it okay to, again, everything is it's like, here's a word. What's the meaning that you give the word? Do you need to be independent sometimes? Yes. Do you need to work on your stuff? Yes. Do you need some alone time? Yes. To me, that's not selfish. To me, that's just part of being, having autonomy inside of a relationship that is a lot about needing and meeting needs. When I think of selfish, it's just more like, yeah, I don't care about your needs. You know, like I kind of don't care. Like right now, it's like all about me and you're sort of an afterthought.
That's not good.
No. Even if it's on and it can happen on a very subtle, minuscule spectrum, right? And sometimes it's just stacked over time and then it becomes really problematic. But everyone has that capacity. Of course, on the far end of the spectrum, that's like a really toxic person. But a lot of us can kind of like be along like the other side of the spectrum. And I think I think it's important for us to recognize the ways in which we can kind of do that.
Yeah. Are there ways to know indicators maybe for when we're hyperextending ourselves?
Yeah. Resentment, but that's usually hyperextending with two things, with not feeling appreciated or expecting something in return, or hyperextending because that's what you always do to be a good person, even though you really need some alone time. So you feel burnt out, you feel resentful, you kind of feel like there's some imbalance in the relationship where you're kind of like always really thinking of your partner's best interest, and yet you don't really feel as supported. Yeah, and there's like familiar feelings in your body of just feeling resentful and burnt out.
Yeah. Are there ways to come back from that?
Absolutely. Stop doing it.
Stop doing it.
Stop doing it. Start communicating. Ask for what it is that you need from your partner. Don't expect your partner to be a mind reader. If there's something that if you feel like you're doing more and they're not really meeting your needs, have a conversation with them about it and just say, look, this is what I've noticed is happening. This is what I'm feeling. I don't want to be resentful, but I can't help it. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I need. Let's talk about it. I don't know where that conversation is going to lead, but it's really important to tell the truth. Notice when you're giving and giving and giving from an old pattern of like people pleasing versus giving from a place because that's your nature and you're generous, and generous is you have like generosity of spirit, and that's part of your value system. And so you're doing it because that's who you are, and you enjoy and you like doing that. Like you actually get some enjoyment in doing it.
How do you walk away from somebody that you care about but who isn't meeting your needs?
Well, you don't do that without a conversation. And if it's a very serious, committed relationship, it probably is a series of conversations. So first, what I will say is a relationship, its purpose is not just to meet our needs. I believe that a relationship its purpose is to grow, to break generational patterns and cycles, to learn how to, I believe that a relationship is a classroom, and that's where we learn about ourselves, how we learn how to be better in relationship, how to love better, how to receive love, how to transcend some of our BS and our egos. I really do believe it's a classroom. And people don't break up when they're meeting each other's needs. And at a full level. The amount of couples who I've worked with together for years, and they had no idea what the other person needed from them to feel loved. No idea what the other person needed in order to feel significant to them. People don't know that. They don't have this conversation, because what you need to feel loved by someone is not necessarily what I need to feel loved, and it's not necessarily like love languages. It goes beyond that, some people might say, yeah, I need affection, but I also need, I need you to communicate with me and to know that you're all in. Someone might say, I know I'm loved because you really appreciate it. You tell me how much you appreciate me. So everyone has their own rules about what has to happen in order for them to feel loved. So you have to have the conversation. That's really important. And then if you've had the conversation, and these are not needs you got to meet all my needs all the time. These are fundamental needs. I need to feel safe with you. And by the way, I also have achieved some stability in myself. I'm not looking to you to be the only source of my safety. Yet, I'm in a relationship with you. If I don't feel safe, I feel like I'm a wreck. I need to feel like you're in this with me, that we are together. These are really core basic needs. I need to feel like we're kind of growing together, that we're talking about the future. We're making plans about the future. We're collaborating. I need communication. It doesn't have to be perfect. These are very valid needs. And if someone just can't do that, and they're showing over and over and over again that they're really just not your match, they're they're not showing up at the level that you need them to show up in order for you to just function in a relationship. And you've had many conversations and you've given them opportunities to meet your needs, and you're really trying. A lot of people will stay in that relationship because they don't want to face the unknown. They don't want to start all over again. They have all these very not unique, very common beliefs about there's no one else out there, or I'm 40 and it's too late for me, or I'm 50 and it's too late for me, like all these things. So I'll just stay in this relationship, very miserable, and I won't end it, even though I am very unhappy and I've been very communicative and have really, really done my best to steer this in the right direction. I do believe that it's a basic human right to just be able to leave a relationship that's not working. Mm-hmm. And why is it so hard is because people really resist change, and they really resist the unknown. If you're miserable, I think it's far better to be single than it is to be miserable in a relationship. So it's one of the hardest conversations you'll ever have is a conversation to end a relationship, and it depends on how long you've been together. But you have to be brave.
Yeah.
And you have to confront all those beliefs that you have, that you're going to have to start all over again and whatnot. I don't believe in staying in relationships that make you miserable. And I also believe that depending on how long the relationship is, you have to ask yourself, why is it making you miserable? Are you part of that? Have you been communicating? Like, you have to go through the checklist. Like, have you communicated your needs? Are you meeting their needs? Like, what's going on? Or are they just so wrong for you? And they've been wrong for you from the very start, and you've always known that, but you've kept them around because it's convenient and you're bored and you don't want to be alone, and you've just been kind of like suppressing that feeling, and now it's finally time to be brave and choose yourself.
Wow. Yeah, people stay together for all different kinds of reasons. I know that my parents were in a relationship. They stayed together for a really long time because they had 3 kids. They had a business that they ran together. But, they got a divorce when I was 18, and they were both great parents, even during their marriage and well beyond it. And yeah, as you get older, as a child, you realize that, that your parents are adults as well, and that they deserve happiness. And so you learn not to fault them for that.
Yeah.
And I want to bring it up because it's like, people will say, well, we've got kids, we share a house,
yeah,
all this stuff. But I think it's, you have to remember that people tend to fall in love with their prisons, and because it's a lot less scary than the unknown.
Yeah, it's safe.
It's safe, yeah. But I would imagine it's way harder to be miserable in a relationship than on your own.
It is, but people get really used to it, and people get very afraid. And it depends on the person. If you're someone who fears abandonment and you fear the endings of things, and you're used to just kind of putting in the effort, and you don't want to lose the comfort of like someone sleeping beside you, again, I think it's about getting really honest with ourselves, telling the truth primarily to ourselves about what the deal is and how we really feel. People stay in relationships and all the time, like you said, and they don't love each other. They're certainly not loving to each other. Some people, they actually do put in the work to really try to fix it, whatever is not working in their relationship. But, some relationships just are not meant to be.
Well, how is receiving love challenging for some people? That's because I've always, it's I've always felt perplexed when that's come up because it feels like a passive process. It's just like, yeah, give me all the love.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But yeah, I guess some people do
Really struggle.
Really struggle, yeah.
And it's a very interesting paradox because every single person craves love, needs love, wants love, right? Like we want it so badly. It's like, here it is. No, not too close. But yeah, I want it. So number of different reasons. One would be this very sort of deep-rooted, hidden in the subconscious belief that you're not worthy of love. Even though consciously you're like, of course I'm worthy of love, but you don't really feel deserving of that love. Another reason is if I receive the love from this person, then we're in some sort of emotionally intimate exchange with each other. And that means there's vulnerability. And that means there's opening up, there's deeper connection. And maybe I have a little avoidance. And that's really scary for me because I don't even know what it looks like or feels like. Maybe in my household, that wasn't how we related to each other. We weren't a very lovey-dovey household. We didn't say I love you a lot. Like we knew that we love each other, but we didn't say it a lot. So it's maybe unfamiliar. Some people, they lean a little bit more codependent. So it's just like, okay, how do they over function in relationships so that they can be enough, so that they can feel needed by the other person. And then if they're needed by the other person, then the other person's never going to leave them. And they have a habit in general, maybe not actually in general, but particularly in romantic relationships and maybe in general, of ignoring themselves, ignoring their own needs. They're not accustomed to pausing and checking in with themselves like, how does this feel for me? Do I like this? Do I not like this? Because everything has been about everyone else. It's just caring for everyone else. And that's actually a beautiful thing, but it needs to be balanced with, it has to be balanced with you checking in with yourself about what is that you need. Because when you're in a relationship with someone, they can't receive the love. Like love is, when I think about love, if I think of it in terms of matter, I'm thinking of it as like a river, like it flows, right? It's not wood, like, right? Don't you think of it as almost like fluid?
Yeah.
Yeah, like flowing.
This ineffable, matter.
Yeah, but it's certainly it's not this,
you can't
right?
Contain it.
You can't contain it. You can't define it. But there is like a movement to it, and it's a give and a receive. It's a two-way street. Like all the metaphors that are used to describe it is this idea of it going two ways. And so if you're not receiving it, you're kind of blocking the flow of it. And so love can't grow in a container where one person or both people are not receiving it. Certainly when they're not giving it, we know that. But if they're not receiving it, and it's actually, what a privilege it is to receive love. And also it's denying the person who loves you the joy of being able to give to you. Like love is a gift. And when someone wants to give you love and you're not receiving it, it's like literally imagine picking out this wonderful gift for someone you care about, whoever that is. And you're like so excited about it and you get it wrapped up in this amazing wrapping paper and this beautiful bow and you've been thinking about it and you're so excited. And then it's like finally the day that you're going to give them the gift and they're like, I don't want it. Imagine how that makes you feel. That's the same thing that a person feels when they love someone, they want to give them love, and the person won't receive it from them.
Wow. Yeah. And loving yourself is step one, you said, right? There are certain people that can't receive it because it's like, it's probably similar to that saying, like, I don't want to be a part of any club that'll have me.
Yeah, totally.
Probably very similar. That some people feel that if somebody is like loving me, then
something must be wrong with them.
Something must be wrong with that person.
Yes. Now we're talking about self-esteem and the spectrum of self-esteem. I don't believe that we have to completely there's two, I talk about this in the book. There's two camps about the self-love movement or whatever. One camp says you have to completely love yourself and be totally whole and good on your own. And then you're ready for a relationship. And then there's the other camp, which is like, that's not true. You learn how to love yourself in relationship with others. You learn how to grow. You learn how to see yourself through the eye. You get a sense of self through how other people see you. Similarly to what you said, it's really hard to see yourself. Right. We can't really see ourselves without the help of others, because everyone else that you come into contact with is actually holding the mirror. I see it as both. I think that you do not have to fully love yourself and feel totally whole. I mean, if that were the case, I think we'd all be a little fucked, honestly. But like, you do not have to completely love yourself and feel like a totally whole human being in order to be, in a functioning, loving relationship. And if you don't love yourself at all, if your self-esteem is really low, if you feel totally disconnected from self and fragmented, you're going to really struggle in relationships, and you're going to be with people who treat you not well, and they're going to reinforce the belief that you've always had about yourself, that you actually are not worthy of the love that you so desire. So to love yourself is relevant, but again, to what degree? And I think it's about getting your self-acceptance and self-esteem at a healthy level, so that if someone is trying to love you, you are not, it might be unfamiliar at first because you haven't really experienced it, but you let it in, and it's not like, what's wrong with you? Like, some people are literally turned off by people who are into them because they think there must be something wrong with you, and that person needs to do a little work on their self-love.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe love is an extreme, way to think about it. You don't want to feel inadequate. You don't want to feel insecure.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly, people walking around with deficits of self-esteem that, you don't necessarily have to love yourself, but I mean, if you're walking around feeling like a half a person,
that's a problem.
That is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where do you think, how is one to cultivate that?
Yeah. Well, again, it's like I'm obviously going to share some of it here, but it's exciting because it's like a very big chapter in, like, I think it might be the largest chapter in the book. So one of the things is you have to do hard things. Like, we have to actually challenge ourselves. Like, for example, I was explaining this the other day. So I've been a yoga practitioner for 25 years, and I taught it for almost 20 years. And what I learned from being a yoga practitioner, is that, yoga, again, it's different for everyone, but yoga is very challenging psychologically and also physically. And a lot of times you'll be doing it and you're like, oh my God, why did I even show up for this today? Like, like that. But and this could be any kind of workout, but this is just my lesson in yoga. But afterwards you feel extraordinary. And for me personally, everyone is different, because I'm a movement person. But nothing quite feels as amazing to me as after yoga practice. And the way that I understand it is because I continued on. I kept going through the psychological and physical suffering in some way in order to get to the other side. And a life of comfort and just comfort is a life without growth. And a life without any growth is a life that leads to low self-esteem. I think that we have to overcome hard things and challenge ourselves to do hard things in order to feel good about ourselves. Like when you think about a child that learns how to go potty in the potty for the first time, or I grew up in New York City. I think you did too. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if this was a milestone in your life, but learning how to take the public bus alone for the first time, or the subway for the first time. That's how the child builds confidence in themselves. And so these are the things that we need to build self-esteem. That's one area. It's also the way that we talk to ourselves. Maybe there's certain key relationships in your life, like family relationships, that need to be hashed out or addressed. Maybe it's learning how to finally stand up for yourself in your relationships whatever that relationship is, and learning boundaries. So these are all sort of various components of learning how to accept ourselves. And really, a big part of it is, you know what? You've got some parts to yourself that are maybe dark and difficult and selfish and maybe narcissistic. And guess what? There is nothing unique about that. Like, you are not special because you've got some like weird stuff to you that's not that great. Everyone does. Look at it. Like, get really familiar with it. It's icky. Can you hold yourself in high regard despite of the fact that you have ambivalence towards some certain parts of yourself?
Yeah. So true. Challenge is so I feel like it's important for the dopamine reward system in your brain, you know, like to set goals and to work towards achieving them. It's so important. I've talked about this recently on a podcast with Arthur Brooks. I don't know if you're familiar.
I am familiar.
Yeah, he's great.
He is great.
I've got this concept that I've been noodling with, the idea of earned versus unearned dopamine. Mm-hmm. You know, you want to be really careful with unearned dopamine. You know, the dopamine that might come from drinking or from watching pornography or from one night stands. It's the earned dopamine. It's these habits that you implement and then reap the rewards from later that I think yields lasting, you know, a lasting sense of satisfaction and ultimately helps to encourage better self-esteem.
I agree.
And the like. Yeah, it's crucial. A life without challenge. I mean, it's like sitting on a couch. It's counterintuitive that sitting on that spending extended periods of time sedentary on your couch would be a stressor.
Yes.
But even down to the cellular level,
I know,
it's a stress.
It's a stress
on the body.
And on the other hand, never doing it is also a stressor. Like, you have to, like, you need, especially if you're an active person physically and mentally and you do a lot, like periods of white space throughout your day, or just like having a time when you're just like on the couch doing nothing, can be incredibly restorative. At least it is for me. But like you said, extended periods of times, it's actually a stressor. It's there's no way to feel good about yourself when you're not actually doing anything.
It's so true. Are there any of the 9 hard truths that you write about in your book that were particularly hard for you to accept?
Yeah, I would say the last one, which is you have to make peace with your parents. And I've been talking about this on other podcasts, and I say this every time, which is, and I do put a disclaimer in the book, I've worked with people who were either sexually or physically abused or terribly psychologically abused as children. And I never, ever suggest to them, you know, forgive your parent who did that to you, or forgive the person who did that to you. You have to make peace with your parent. I don't. Oftentimes I say, no, you don't have to do that. For people who've experienced that, my work is to help them become the heroes of their own life so that they see themselves as heroes and not as survivors, because I see them as a hero. So I want to help them see themselves as that. But for the rest of us, which is really the majority, is we usually have, even if it's not a parent with whom you struggled, you could have loved your parent and had a really strong relationship with them. I mean, there's a case study in the book where, you know, there's someone who had a great relationship with her mom, but her mom had a very specific belief system about work, and you have to really, really work hard because she was an immigrant, right? And then my client took that as, well, I have to always work. I don't have time for relationships. I can never be vulnerable. She would say something to her daughter like, you know, girls don't cry, whatever, like that, you know, which is funny because you kind of hear the opposite, which is, you know, boys don't cry. But so sometimes it's making peace with the parent that you really struggled with. Sometimes it's making peace with the parent. And that peace is, I can actually be me. I don't have to be who they tried to mold me to be just because they were trying to protect me, or because that was like their belief system. So it's almost like freedom from parents. The reason that was difficult for me to write is because my history with my father is extremely complicated. And I was very afraid of him as a child. He never He never physically touched me, but he was very scary. He was very shut down. He had undiagnosed as a child, when I was a child, bipolar disorder. He was a very, very well-known psychiatrist. He wrote a book called The Difficult Child that was very famous at the time. The book was about me. So like I grew up with this belief system, I guess I'm difficult, right? So I had a very complicated relationship with him, and he and his relationship with my mom was terrible. Like that was my model. And I spent most of my life either fearing him or hating him, and usually a combination of both, but like visceral hatred. And when I was 21 years old and graduated college, he did something that pissed me off, and I didn't know, I was too afraid to stand up for myself. So I just decided to ghost him and never answer his call again. And I did that for like 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And, there are circumstances where estrangement and never speaking to a parent again is the only option and the right thing to do. For me, it felt like the only thing that I could do. And I had this belief that if I did that and he's not in my life, I could just forget about him. But they can't. That memory can never leave your unconscious. And it was showing up, not in all my romantic relationships, mind you. I had a wonderful relationship in my 20s that really wasn't in any way mirroring my relationship with my father, but I did have other relationships that did, particularly my ex-husband. And so I realized, if you don't handle this business, even if you never speak to the person again, but internally you change the story. You change the way you look at them, you change the way you think about them, you change the way you think about yourself when you're with them, so that you're no longer looking at that scenario through the filter of your younger self, but you look at through the filter of your wiser adult self, and you start to learn to get more perspective, and you challenge that story, like really challenge it. And then you start to have some peace. He ended up passing away this past November, last year. And I had been in contact with him for a while. But I can never say that I had like this great relationship, but I was healing that. I really was healing that. I went from like hating him and having no boundaries with him to, God damn it, you won't talk to me like that, like the other side of the spectrum, which is just all ego, to the middle ground, which is just like, this is just him. He feels out of control. I'm going to tell him how I feel. I'll gently enforce some boundaries. I don't have to get all crazy about this. And so I reached a lot of healing with that. And I realized that was like the freedom that I really needed. That chapter's hard because it's heavy. That's like heavy stuff. And he had I was writing that chapter about a month after he died. So there was a lot of processing there. And it was really cool. Like I found a picture of him. I didn't find it, was like sent to me. And he was in a pigeon. I don't know if you know this, but there's a pose in yoga called pigeon pose, and it's like a hip opener. It was actually a really good pose. I had this was a picture I'd never seen. I've never seen him in pigeon pose. We never talked about it. And it was wild because like his pigeon pose was very similar to mine. And like obviously he's a man and I'm a woman, it's two different bodies, but I was like, oh my God, like my body is actually very similar, like genetics. I was like, I have the same arms, like I saw so many similarities, and I thought that was a really cool metaphor. I added that in the book, but yeah, long story answer to that. That was a hard one. And I think it's going to be hard for people to read, but I also think it's going to be, the book is it's not just so confronting. I think it's going to be very helpful for people,
Who'd you write it for?
Good question. I used to think I wrote it for this woman, and I would think of her as somewhere in the 30s and 40s kind of age range, maybe late 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe millennial-ish. And who was just sort of like a great catch and didn't really understand why she wasn't like why she was struggling so much, either in relationships, either she was in a relationship and married or not. And she was experiencing a lot of pain because of that. But then I realized it's not just a woman, it's like men too, because I worked with a lot of men. And so I just wrote it for people who feel like that this is like the one area of their life that they can't quite understand. Like they don't really get why it's not on point. And, I'm hoping that the book answers that question and also gives them the tools to make it better.
Well, I'm so proud of you. You're
Thank you.
such a light, and I'm so proud to know you. And yeah, I don't think there's anybody better in the space,
That's very kind of you to say.
So full of insight and empathy, and such a great communicator, such a great teacher. So yeah, man, I'm just so excited for the book, and I hope everybody listening picks it up and supports. Where can people grab it? Where can they find you on social media?
Thank you. So yeah, JillianTurecki.com/book. So it's my full name.com/book, and then you'll find it. My first and last name. You can find me all over social media.
All over social media.
And my podcast, Jillian on Love.
Jillian on Love. Last question that gets asked everybody on the show: what does living a genius life mean to you? I feel like I've asked you when you were here the last time.
I know. I wonder what I said.
It changes, which is fun.
Living a genius life is good relationships. All relationships. I really do think that that's the hardest area for a lot of people to master. All relationships, not just talking about romantic. It's like if you have a genius life, you've got really good people around you and you're having a little fun.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
I love that. I've got good people around me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you having fun?
I'm having fun.
Okay, good. You're living a genius life.
Yeah, living the genius life. I wake up every day excited to do what I do. I'm happy that I've gotten this far, and everything else is just icing on the cake.
That's genius.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much for having me.
Best of luck with the book. It Begins With You. Fantastic book. And I'm sure people are going to love it.
Thank you.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.